California is under lockdown again, and there's a good chance that other states are going to follow the same path. So stick around for the rest of the video so we can talk about a timeline of what happened in California over the previous year and see if any of that trajectory is going to apply to your individual state. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're talking about how California lockdowns are back. We all knew they would eventually come back again, but this time they're even more restrictive in many ways. Yes, there's caveats as to whether or not a county has to comply with these lockdowns. However, the lockdowns that are being put in place are extremely restrictive, and the second time around is foretelling for what might happen in your state, because California tends to set the pace when it comes to these lockdowns. We saw it happen back in March. They were one of the first states to declare a statewide stay-at-home order, and guess what? We're doing it again, and many states back in March followed the same exact path as California to try to mitigate any of the problems they were having. So I'm preparing for the possibility of lockdowns to happen where I am. You should be preparing for them as well. And if we're both preparing for the possibility of bugging in for longer periods of time just based on what may or may not occur, hit the subscribe button below, because we're going to keep communicating about what's happening and try to stay ahead of whatever we can see coming our way in the future. Now, one thing I will say is that some of the counties in California and some of the people in California are not abiding by these lockdowns for obvious reasons. However, these restrictions are being put into place, and eventually, I'm sure if things get more and more out of control, they'll be tightened even more tight, and things will become more desperate when it comes to what is being allowed and what's being enforced and what's being fined and who knows what else. So just keep those things in mind, because yes, we might not always agree with the direction that our leadership is taking. However, they seem to have a way of punishing us in certain different aspects of our lives if we don't comply. So that's something else you have to prepare for, if you know what I mean. Now, let's talk about what happened in California during this past year, just to get a quick idea as to where we're heading and where your state might be heading, so you can watch out for any of these red flags that might be occurring in the sense of moving towards more and more restrictive lockdowns, okay? So this is a good way to look into the future and see if you're kind of trending in the same way, okay? So, March 4th, state of emergency was declared in California, okay? So that was like the first step. March 19th, statewide stay-at-home orders were declared, okay? So we're talking a period of 2 weeks after the the statewide emergency was declared. In 2 weeks, they actually issued the stay-at-home orders, okay? So moving on from there, March 22nd, the National Guard was activated, okay? Because they needed all the help for the response and whatever else they had going on, especially, enforcing the restrictions. Now, March 29th, all state parks were closed, okay? April 22nd, some of the stay-at-home orders started to relax. So we can see here that a statewide stay-at-home order was issued March 19th. And by April 22nd, they were starting to relax. So what that means is that if we see statewide stay-at-home orders, at least last time around, there was about a month before they started to ease up. So you got to at least prepare for a month if that's something that might happen again for you. Now, moving on from there, mask mandates were starting to be enforced on that same day, April 22nd. And what I mean by that is that they were being enforced through citation. So that could be a possibility, if people want to lift restrictions, they might start pushing other enforcement code into other aspects of what they're trying to do. Okay, moving on from there, May 1st. Modoc County was one of the first counties in California to defy the restrictions and say, we're not going to abide by that. We're going to let our businesses open and we're going to let things happen. May 1st was also May Day, and there was a large protest at the state capitol about the restrictions. So it only took about a month and a week to get to the point where people had had enough. So understand that that's exactly what you could probably expect next time around, except that time might even be shorter because of the fact that people have already been through this rodeo before. Okay, so May 4th, phase 2 of lifting restrictions begins. So what we're gonna say here is that all these things started on March 19th, and it wasn't until May 4th when those restrictions really started to come back, okay? So now we're talking the period of a month and a half. Okay, moving forward, May 25th, all retail stores and churches could reopen. So it took almost 2 months, or a little bit longer than 2 months, for that situation to come into place. Then, June 12th, bars, restaurants, and theaters were allowed to open under new guidelines. So if you're in the hospitality industry, you understand that it was months before you could get back to work. We're talking almost 3 months, okay? And that's a long time to not be making money or not be at work. So it's very difficult for a lot of people in that industry, which is not something that's good for anyone. Okay, so after that, we're gonna jump ahead because everything else in between June 12th and October 20th was a lot of back and forth. Restrictions changing, risk levels changing, color tiers, all kinds of stuff through different counties, and things just happening in different ways. But nothing really pertinent happened until October 20th, which is where new guidelines were issued for opening theme parks. So theme parks have been closed since March, and on October 20th finally got some new guidelines. So let's just keep that in mind, because honestly, theme parks are having a very hard time, as we all know. November 10th, 11 counties had to move back to more restrictions. So March 19th, stay-at-home orders were declared across the entire state of California. By November 10th, 11 counties had to start moving back to more restrictions. So we're talking that in the period of 8 months, suddenly everything had to start happening again, okay? So November 16th, 40 counties moved back to more restrictions, not just 11. So you can see what's happening here. November 17th, all the panic buying started again. So you can see all the panic buying starting to happen in stores around the state of California, because people are being put back on lockdowns and restrictions are coming back, and people are getting afraid of what they'll be able to do or not in the near future. Okay? November 21st, overnight curfews were set for people with purple tier counties. So suddenly we're in curfew situation. Now, don't forget that curfews are something we talk about in the sense of martial law very often, but over in California where they're doing these restrictions, it's just about stopping the spread for some reason that seems to happen more often at night, I guess. So that being said, curfews are in place November 21st, okay? December 3rd is when new stay-at-home orders were issued. Okay, and those orders, I believe, just took effect this past Sunday. Now, the new orders take effect when a region reaches 15% ICU capacity. That's the caveat, okay? So if your region's not dealing with that, then you don't have to follow these new stay-at-home restriction orders. However, they are projecting those numbers to reach that in many, many counties across the state because of, where they're at when it comes to ICU capacity. So, what is banned in this new lockdown? Gatherings are banned, okay? Retail capacity is extremely lowered. Travel and use of hotels for lodging and tourism is prohibited, okay? Restaurants and bars are only open for takeout and delivery. And there's things like salons and everything else being affected as well. What does this mean? It means that from March 4th, when the state of emergency was declared, to December 3rd, okay, so almost exactly 9 months, we're back to square one. And that's what you need to watch out for in your neck of the woods. If you have seen any of the red flags that we just discussed on that timeline starting to take place and starting to move forward, then you have to be prepared for the concept that your state might issue even more and more restrictive orders very soon here. And one of the things you have to keep in mind is that it really didn't start going hard until November 10th, okay? So look, on October 20th, we're talking about reopening theme parks. And then just a short 3 weeks later, we're saying actually these counties are moving back. And then 5 days after that, this many more counties are moving back. And then 2 weeks after that, statewide restrictions are back into place. Lockdowns are back into place, especially if your county is in the 15% ICU capacity realm, okay? So just keep in mind, this is what California's doing. They love to set the trends, they love to set the pace for the rest of the country, and you have to guarantee yourself that at least some states will follow suit. Now, I know some will definitely not. We all know that. However, if you're in a state, especially like New York or New Jersey or some other state that shares a lot of similar interests with California, then you need to be aware of this being something to watch out for, because they're the first ones to do it generally. And now we're not going to be the last ones over there either, I don't think. Okay? So, that being said, prepare for what you have to prepare for. And when I say that, I would say your number one preparation right now in regards to more lockdowns coming back and more restrictions coming into place is probably your financial situation. Because with your finances being affected, whether or not it's due to a direct effect by a loss of your job, a direct effect by your business losing income, a direct effect by the market being volatile, who knows what might have caused you to lose income or hurt your finances, but at the same time, anyone in the prepping realm knows that staying on top of that is very important. And right now, it's very important to make sure that you can get through if you need to. And a lot of people might not be able to. So do what you can to prepare for the idea that your finances are going to be affected again in a negative way. And make sure you have ways to try to better yourself while you're locked down. Because honestly, it's one of the only things you can really do is make sure that you will become a better person on the other end. So Just wanted to bring this to your attention. The lockdowns are back, they're aggressive. We all already knew they were going to happen again, but now we have a roadmap as to like what to watch out for when these things occur, okay? And if your state is doing any of the things California's doing, now you know you're probably on your way to even more restrictions. So, without anything else to say about California lockdowns coming back and how it might affect you here in the future, that is going to be it for Magic Prepper.